So it was weird to me that the Dead Space remake came out earlier this year, and it felt like it just kind of came and went. Does that make sense? Like, it felt like the game was gonna come out, and then it came out, and then nobody talked about it since its release. Dead Space was on sale for 40 something dollars on Steam the other day, so I bought it, I played through it, and I had a pretty good time. I think what's pretty good about Dead Space Remake is it's very similar, if not like one-to-one in most scenarios, to its original. The things that it's updated are making the controls more modern and the graphics being the most notable aspect of the remake. And the graphics look really good, but personally what I thought was the most amazing part of the Dead Space remake was the lighting. It's film-esque, if that makes sense. The way they use lighting and shadows in horror movies or cheaper movies is to hide the non-believable special effects. Things in darkness tend to be scarier than when you shine a light on things. And Dead Space plays with shadows and light and darkness very, very well. I actually think it is the best thing the remake does. It's actually super good. It has really good sound design. It's constantly making crunching noises, whispers, and the little sound effects that play throughout the game are also very well done. I think it's pretty good for most of what it tries to accomplish. I think it's very successful. And the majority of the game takes place on the Ishimura, which is this big giant mining spaceship, and it's pretty memorable. It's hard to forget being on this spaceship and moving around. It's very, I wouldn't say unique, I wouldn't say creative. I think plenty of video games and plenty of movies have taken place on spaceships. However, it's well done. And I would take something like the Ishimura, something that's done exceptionally well, over something that's creatively new but done poorly. This is taking the idea of playing a video game on a spaceship to its absolute maximum level. It's like not even the standard, it's the pinnacle you can't achieve. I like the creativity of the weapons in Dead Space, but this kind of comes from Dead Space 2008, right? I like the idea that you're not playing as a space marine, you're playing as a space engineer, and so your weapons are supposed to be engineer weapons. I like that. I think that is a cool creative idea, that you are essentially using tools and not really weapons, except for the assault rifle. I like that the levels are all connected. You can kind of go back and forth. You have a nice map that shows you this. You don't necessarily have to fast travel everywhere if you don't want to. And the game keeps a pretty good pace. I would say, mechanically speaking, going from level to level never feels like you're dicking around. It never feels like you're just going to go to the jungle level because you have to go to the jungle level. It feels like everything you're doing has a purpose. It either adds new enemies, a new mechanic, or a new meaningful plot moment will happen there. The story itself is serviceable. I don't think the story of Dead Space is bad, but I don't think it's the most gripping thing ever. It's fine. It's fine. I wasn't bored by it, and I wasn't surprised by it, but it's good enough. It does what it needs to do. Like I said, it's serviceable. The main selling point of Dead Space as a series is the concept of shooting off the limbs of alien zombies. Instead of just shooting a zombie in the head or dealing a lot of damage to one, you are instead encouraged to shoot off their limbs. The game even tells you this like 3 times in 3 different ways at the start of the game. And that concept is really cool. And I think that that's kind of the key enjoyment of Dead Space, is that the combat, the idea of shooting off monsters' limbs, is a fun one. It's fun, it's different, it's unique. And I would say that the ever-increasing pool of enemies is good. It's not just that like the enemy diversity becomes different as you progress more and more through the game, but also the difficulty of those enemies becomes more and more different. I think it's a good curve of adding new enemies and new enemy variants throughout the entire game that make it pretty enjoyable. I think visually and audibly the game is done very well. Narratively, the game is fine. I don't have any real complaints about it. And most importantly, mechanically, it utilizes its game mechanics in a very effective and satisfying way. The game kind of gives you space magic. You have like a slow down time spell and a telekinesis spell you can use. And those are both very useful in solving puzzles, but also great for combat and making situations feel pretty fun and different throughout the game. The weapons are good, your movement feels good, the level design feels good. It doesn't feel like anything is wasted in Dead Space. And I would recommend this game if you want a mechanically solid horror game to go through. It's not super scary because you kind of always have good weapons, and it's always a very similar strategy to killing every enemy. You either chop off their limbs or freeze them in place and then chop off their limbs. But ultimately, it is a good, enjoyable experience. So you can turn the video off now, but I'm kind of lying. because I played through Dead Space Remake, and I didn't feel anything, while I was playing it. I was kind of just like half asleep through playing the game. And afterwards, I didn't really know what was happening. I've never not felt anything about a game before, right? Like everything I said in the opening part of the video is all true. It is a good, well-made game. And yet, if you were to ask me, did you enjoy playing it? I would respond, well, I didn't not enjoy playing it. And to me, I found that very, very weird. I feel weird feeling nothing about the Dead Space remake in 2023. So what I decided to do was I looked up reviews, and everybody loves this game, despite me not hearing a peep about it since it came out. And I'm reading these reviews, right? And they're all saying the same thing. And that's fine, but I also hate that they're all saying the same thing. Does that make sense? Like, it's okay that they're all saying the same thing. They all like the game. It's an 8.5. It's a 9 out of 10. Like, that's great. That's great. But it's also kind of like, what they're saying is all the same, These game reviewers kind of like all feel like space zombies to me. Like, they all just want to eat brains, so they're just saying whatever it takes to get the brains. Like, if you say Isaac Clarke now talks, and like the lighting looks really good, and he has engineer weapons, you can get fed like some space brains to munch on, and they never say anything different. It's all the same. They all praise the same things, and they all praise the same things in the same way. In Dead Space, I don't run. I walk, almost exclusively. I ease my way down the dimly lit corridors of the morbid screams bounce through its hallways with care. The improved presentation of Dead Space already a graveyard of a shit. I peer around corners for the child playing hide and seek, and then mutated inhabitants pivoting back and forth as I go, as if trying to fix my shadow. I walk shows not from lighting. Tough guys. These designs space horribly. One stack pivot. And next encounters bring to the Dead Space feels like we're well served for horror game unmuted explosion. The Motive Studios Dead Space is a horror remake and then a bang, and I'm plunged into darkness, and that's when I run. All these reviewers talk about walking slowly through the Ishimura, never knowing if you're gonna be in danger. But the game still, just like I remembered it from 2011, the game plays the same loud-ass music when an enemy's around. So obviously you know when an enemy's gonna show up. You can just run through that shit. Who cares? Like, in an empty corridor, if there's not loud music playing or weird alien grunting happening, you can just run. There won't be anything that shows up. I don't know, man. I'm having all these like emotions and kind of like anger, but not the game and not the people reviewing the game, but the fact that I don't feel anything after playing Dead Space Remake. I have never had this before. Maybe I'm a zombie. Maybe this is just what it feels like, and that's what these people feel like, and they just don't care. Like, objectively, there's a lot of good mechanical stuff that's in Dead Space 2023, but there's nothing emotionally gripping about this game. You don't feel anything, really. So just say the same thing everybody else says. Maybe that's how it all is. I don't know. Maybe being this hollow and empty after beating a completely made game is a sign that I'm losing my humanity, and I should just eat the brains. I don't know. People were talking about how the weapons feel really good to use, and I thought the enemies had way too much HP and the guns never felt great. They didn't feel bad, but they felt nothing. They felt like I was eating a bag of potato chips. Yeah, I like potato chips, but I'm never going to feel satisfied after eating a bag of them. People mention that the upgrade system got slightly improved, but the upgrade system still sucks. Like, when you compare it to other upgrade systems in any other game, this one requires you to pick upgrades to then get access to others. So if I want to increase the damage on my gun, I can't just upgrade my gun to do more damage. I might have to upgrade the gun capacity, and then the reload speed, and then for some reason how much air my suit can take before I can upgrade damage on my pistol. That, to me, sounds needlessly tedious. And then you backtrack for all these side quests. People talk about how the levels are all interconnected and you can go back and, oh my god, you can explore some of these areas. But why would you? The side quests don't mean anything. They don't do anything because the story is already wrapped up and told nicely as a way it was in 2008. When I played it in 2011, the game didn't need side quests. So it's weird that it has side quests. So they have to do some other things, or instead you're finding essentially audio logs, and that's, I don't know, man, that's not very good. The audio log hunting in Halo 3 ODST has a bigger, more meaningful payoff than any of the side quests in Dead Space Remake. To me, I don't think the backtracking felt particularly great. People are praising this, like this massively good level design, and while I think the Ishimura as a spaceship, as like an ethereal concept is very memorable, I do not think the actual levels are. Even while playing through the game on one playthrough and just backtracking, I found the rooms and hallways to be extremely forgettable. Just one narrow hallway after another until you end up at a big room that's either going to be a combat arena or a puzzle room. Like, for all these people saying these memorable locations of Dead Space, one of them tell me what is memorable about the medical wing in Dead Space. And don't say when the baby shows up and kills the guy in the unskippable, like, little cinematic thing. Like, what's memorable about the level design here? Nothing. What's memorable is that it's a ship, and it's a ship that's, like, designed really well. I don't know, man. I was going through all of these different reviews to try and see if people felt something, and I wanted to feel something, and they're all just kind of saying the same thing over and over again until I came to like Kotaku, and this girl was like, yeah, I don't know, the boss fights suck. And I beat the game. I beat the game twice. Once to beat the game, and then once to start recording footage for it for the video, and I completely forgot there were boss fights. I'd argue there aren't boss fights. I would argue there aren't boss fights. If you think about it, the boss fights are like what, the hunter and then the thing whose, giant pustules you have to shoot off 2 times, and then what, the boss at the end of the game that everybody notoriously hated? How come no one brings up the fact that they kept in the terrible boss fight from the end of the game? How come nobody brings up the fact these boss fights do suck? This Kotaku lady is correct. These are bad boss fights. I wouldn't even count them as boss fights. They are so nothing. Like, the game's like, oh, you're going to be chased by the hunter. I said before, you have time stop magic. Just stop time. It becomes more of a nuisance than anything else. Oh, man, I really have to solve this puzzle. Oh, here comes the hunter. Boop, time stopped. Boop, time stop. It's not worth it. It's not like scary. I mean, I will say that Dead Space has gotten a lot of yelps out of me during these playthroughs, but I don't treat them as successful scares. I think they're all cheap. Dead Space does this little bit that it loves to do where it puts you in its little narrow hallways, and then it'll spawn one enemy on one side of the hallway in front of you. So you'll start shooting it, and then it'll spawn an enemy behind you. So while you're shooting the first enemy, the second one comes up and gets you in the back. And I'm like, okay, I guess. You technically scared me. In a court of law, you win. I have been scared. But I think that's very cheap. The only reason I'm scared is because I'm not focusing on something being behind me. I'm focusing on the thing in the hallway in front of me. And I don't respect that, I guess, as something that's scary. And like I said, you always know when enemies are nearby because the game is blasting music in your ears. Also, something people really didn't talk about until I read the Jimquisition review is that the game just glitches out a lot. On my first playthrough, I had enemies that were just stuck in walls or ceilings or body parts that would just spin around and whirl around in place or go flying all over a little room. On my recorded playthrough, the game just broke before a cutscene happened and I had to reload from the last checkpoint. Why does no one talk about this? Why do they all say the same thing? I don't get it. I don't get it. I'm not here saying that, like, Dead Space is a bad video game. Of course it isn't. It's a good video game, but it has problems. How come no one talks about the problems? How come the only problems people mention is that Isaac Clarke can talk? Something I didn't remember that he didn't do. I'm playing through the game and I go, I don't remember if Isaac Clarke talked or not. But whatever, I haven't played this game in 12 years. And then they get to this one little cutscene where this guy says something, and what he says, I couldn't escape it from my brain. I'm like, oh, the main character definitely didn't talk. You never say, but you don't seem like the talkative type, if this game was written with somebody who talked, because Isaac talks a pretty frequent amount, even to this bad guy. However, I don't know why he would say that unless they just kind of copy-pasted the script from the original one where Isaac didn't talk, but now he does. You know what I mean? And I don't know. People keep saying that this stuff is like, and you feel all the weight of the movement. I didn't. Isaac runs very fast. He runs faster than most Resident Evil characters. I mean, he's sprinting while ADSing at the speed of a Call of Duty player. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also kind of like this feeling that I didn't feel like I was playing like a real kind of like bumbling character who's not used to fighting zombies. I felt like I was playing a Space Marine. And the game, like I said, feels good to play. But it's weird. It's weird that nobody brings any of this stuff up. It's weird that these reviews all say 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, and the only thing that they can complain about is that Isaac Clarke talks. Is it really 1.5 points off from perfect 10 because the guy says a few lines of dialogue? Really? All those block pushing puzzles, escort missions, and backtracking, none of that gets a knock on anything? Or they'll say stuff in the bottom of these reviews that they didn't mention at all during the actual body of the review, like they are afraid. Why is nobody talking about any of the problems with the game except for the one girl from Kotaku? I don't know. I don't know how to articulate this because I'm having a lot of emotions because I don't have any about the actual game. The game is fine, good even, but when I beat it, I kind of just wanted to uninstall it. And then when my friends asked me what did I think of it, I went, nothing. I don't know. I don't have thoughts on it. It could be good, I guess. I can't see a reason why it wouldn't be good. For some reason, I don't want to recommend it. It feels like nothing. It's like the equivalent of walking out of a movie that's like a 2 out of 5 movie and going, oh, that wasn't bad. I'll never watch it again, and I wouldn't recommend seeing it in theaters, but I didn't feel like I wasted the 2 hours I spent watching it. Do you feel that way about a video game? I don't know. I don't feel bad about the dozen hours I spent playing Dead Space Remake, but I'll never play it again. I wouldn't say someone else should play it, but I wouldn't say you shouldn't. I don't know. Maybe I just am a zombie, man. I should just eat the brains. As I slowly and cautiously maneuver my way to the end of this review, much like Isaac on the Ishimura, I take one last look around to make sure I didn't leave any detail behind. This is an experience packed with little details and nods to so many other pieces of horror that it's easy to let some slip by. The gorgeous visual design of Dead Space Remake is the most standout part of the game. The lighting effects, specifically the use of shadows, on top of the beautiful Frostbite engine, make this a visceral and visually splendid showcase to watch. The gameplay is the same iconic and legendary gameplay from 2008 that made Dead Space the classic that it is, but with a more modern control scheme. The mysterious twists and turns of the story are just as captivating and complicated as the inner hallways of the Ishimura itself. The iconic locations of the Ishimura are all fantastically interconnected now, and are even worth revisiting thanks to the remake's newly included feature of side quests. These side quests encourage you to explore and reward you with new upgrades and, more importantly, new information about the story. Honestly, the mechanical, visual, and narrative aspects of the Dead Space remake are all brilliantly constructed in a way that is extremely faithful to the 2008 original and easily digestible for the modern gaming audience. You won't find an action space horror game quite like Dead Space, unless you want to travel back to 2008, that is. Dead Space 23 is an epically grand experience that successfully brings this horror classic into the modern era.